Caroline Mitchell here. I'm an ex-police detective and crime thriller author. Ever since I heard about this case, I have always been fascinated by it, and there are so many twists and turns. I can't wait to share it with you and see what you think. But first, to start with a disclaimer. As I mentioned, I am an ex-police detective, but any of the cases I discuss I have never had access to, and I certainly would never discuss any case I had dealt with in real life out of respect for the victims. The information that I have researched and collated is available in the public domain. Zeb Wayne Quinn was just 18 years old from Asheville in North Carolina. Described as a likeable soul, he was a member of the Officer Reserve Training Corps and working his way through community college with a part-time job. On January the 2nd in the year 2000, Zeb finished working in the electronics department in the Walmart store. It was just gone 9 and he'd planned to go and look at a car with his friend, Robert Jason Owens, who was also a colleague of his. Now, Owens worked part-time in Walmart but also in the nearby Volvo garage, and they sometimes played pool together. So it seems like a sensible thing if Owens already had knowledge of cars that the two of them would go and look at a car together. Zeb had saved for a long time to replace his battered old Mazda and was most likely excited about going to look at something a bit newer. So the two of them drove off, but on the way they stopped at a convenience store and they were both captured on CCTV at just past 9:15.
Zeb left the Walmart where he worked on Hendersonville Road on the night of January 2nd, 2000. Was last seen at a Citgo convenience store on Long Shoals Road around 9:30 p.m.
After that, both cars were seen leaving. Owens was driving his car with Zeb following behind. Now, according to Owens, what happened next was that he was driving along the road when Zeb flashed him from behind. And Owens picked it up in his rear view mirror and pulled over to the curb. Zeb said he'd just got a page, so he was going to go back to the gas station to check what the message was about. But Owens stayed at the side of the road and waited for him to return. So 10 minutes later, he said that Zeb came back and he was really frantic and really upset, but wouldn't say what the page was about. That he'd spoken to someone over the phone, obviously, and answered it, but he said that he would have to cancel their trip for now and that he had to sort out whatever this phone call was about. He was so anxious that he rear-ended Owens' car when he drove away, and this left a few marks on the car. Zeb apologised quickly and said that he'd fix up with him the next day and drove off. Owens was the last person to see Zeb alive. So when Zeb didn't return his pages or go home that night, his mum became really worried, and soon after she reported him missing. 2 days later, Zeb called in sick to work at Walmart with a fever, but the strange thing was, a colleague picked up the phone and she recognised the voice as not being Zeb, and she traced the call, and the call was returned to the nearby Volvo garage. Yeah, that's where Owens worked. So the police were called and Owens was questioned, and he said that Zeb told him or asked him as a favour to call in sick for him on his behalf. But the police did question him but didn't get any further evidence that we know of with regards Owens' involvement in Zeb's disappearance. It was all becoming very strange. But police did discover that Owens had gone to the hospital on the night that he was reported to be with Zeb. He had a head injury and cracked ribs. He said that he was involved in a second prang after Zeb left, and that he took himself off to the hospital to be treated, but no accident report was ever made, and the damage to his truck was minor and not really consistent with the injuries that he spoke about. He continued to deny any involvement in Zeb's disappearance, but he was a person of interest in the case. Now, in police terms, a person of interest can be any potential suspect or important witness in the case, someone worth keeping an eye on. Then, during their numerous inquiries, police discovered that Zeb had a blossoming romance with a woman named Misty Taylor. He was reported to be completely infatuated with the woman, but she had a boyfriend who was said to be controlling and domineering by the name of Wesley Smith, and they just had a baby together, and Wesley found out about this blossoming relationship and put an immediate end to it, although they did talk in secret for a while afterwards. But a few days before Zeb disappeared, Misty cut off all ties, and Zeb became worried by this, so he tried to ring her, but when he rang he forgot to block where the number was coming from, so he panicked and immediately hung up the call. After that, he spoke to his family and said that he was really worried, that he was scared that if Wesley found out about his phone call, that he would beat him up or worse. And this was 4 days before he disappeared. Remember that page that Zeb received on the night he disappeared? Well, police investigated it, and it turned out that it came from the house of his Aunt Ina. Now, Zeb wasn't particularly close to his aunt, and she denied sending it. She had a strong alibi though. She said she was having dinner with friends that night. Who were the friends? Well, none other than Misty Taylor, her boyfriend Wesley Smith, and Misty's mum. She also said her home had been broken into that night, although nothing had been taken, but things were about to take an even stranger turn.
Zebb Quinn, a shy teenager from Asheville, North Carolina, had been missing for 2 weeks when his mother received a startling phone call late in the evening. A young woman who works with her at the hospital and went to high school with Zeb believes she saw Zeb's car in the restaurant parking lot adjacent to the hospital.
I was in a panic at that point. I didn't know what to think.
Denise immediately calls the police. Patrol Officer Chuck Sands is one of the first to report to the scene.
On the back windshield of the car, there were a set of lips drawn in what appeared to be a lipstick type material, and some other little markings adjacent to the sides of the lips. I believe they may have resembled like an exclamation point or something.
Police examine the car closely, looking for any clues that could lead them to Zeb.
The car looked as if it had been parked in a very conspicuous manner right next to the road where it would be visible. There were a number of things that were kind of unusual about it, one of which was the fact that there was a live puppy inside the car.
Investigators find themselves with an uncommon piece of evidence.
I think the puppy was placed on the car to draw attention to the car. Most people are going to notice a dog locked in a vehicle, and they're going to call about the dog being locked in the vehicle.
Strangely, a pair of lips were drawn in lipstick on the back window of the car, and what looked like an exclamation mark. As if that wasn't strange enough, a live Labrador puppy was found in the back of the car. Several drink bottles, like soda bottles, and a jacket that didn't belong to him were found there too. And the seat was pulled up close to the steering wheel, so that's like someone shorter than him was driving it. The lights were left on, and all indications prove that whoever left this car there sure wanted it to be found. Why though? I did look into it though, and the puppy was thankfully rescued by one of the investigators involved, so at least the puppy was okay. Now, witnesses came forward to say that they saw a couple driving the car not long before it was found in the hospital car park. And it was a somewhat terrifying composite sketch that was created with a police artist. Now, the sketch bore a strong resemblance to Misty Taylor. She was spoken to, but nothing further came from it at the time. Apparently, it's been said that investigators believed more than one person was involved in Zeb's disappearance, but no arrests were made in the case.
Zebb Quinn. His case has sparked nationwide attention, but still more than a decade later, there are no new clues as to what happened to him.
News 13's Aaron Adelson sat down with Quinn's mother today and has a look back at the case. Aaron?
That's right. Well, 15 years ago, Zeb hoped to become a sports broadcaster, yet this evening his disappearance remains a cold case, and for his mother, that's just about impossible to cope with. Zeb's disappearance left a hole in his mother's life.
Wish he was here.
Denise Vlahakis misses him and always keeps him in her thoughts.
God gives us memories so that we might have roses in December.
For 15 years, she has not known whether Zeb is dead or alive. If he's dead, she hasn't had a chance to bury him. If you think it might get easier with time, Vlahakis says it does not.
And somebody is watching their children grow. And we are living the nightmare of not knowing where he is or what happened or anything.
Zeb.
And that's it. It went cold and the case remained dormant for more than a decade, until March 2015, when a Food Network star contestant, Christy Schoen, and her husband TJ Codd went missing. They failed to answer calls from their family, they didn't turn up to an arranged event, and their family became worried about them, so they asked the police to go around there and do a welfare check. But it appeared that this couple had just disappeared from the face of the earth. Now, Christy was 5 months pregnant with her unborn child, Skylar, and it was very out of character for them to just disappear like this. But not long after, police received a tip-off from a neighbour saying that they saw a man acting very suspiciously nearby, and he was dumping bags, large bags. And who was that man? Well, none other than Robert Jason Owens. He was a neighbour and somewhat of a friend of Christie's, and he was hired to help them with some home renovations. And they knew each other pretty well. So why he was there when they weren't, dumping their belongings, came to the police's immediate attention. And they found ID belonging to Christy and various other items belonging to the family inside.
The search for Christy and JT Codd eventually led to their neighbor and contractor. At a news conference, Sheriff Van Duncan saying Sunday night, Robert Jason Owens was seen trashing their belongings in Candler.
They identified that someone had come out and in a very suspicious way had left things in a dumpster there at Donna Drive. We responded, and at that point in time, we were able to locate items which we knew belonged to Christy Schoen. They did find Christy Schoen's ID in that dumpster and several other items that came from the house.
Owens eventually charged with 3 murders. According to friends, Christy, the former Food Network reality show contestant, was 5 months pregnant. Authorities released a stack of search warrants, including details from an interview with the suspect's wife.
She did, and what is contained in the search warrant, make the statement that he said that he had killed JT Cobb and had struck him with a vehicle.
The sheriff says still unidentified remains were found in Owens' wood stove.
He did admit to taking the bodies, storing on his property, and destroying. He did admit to that during his interview.
So things took a very grim turn when Owens' property was searched and the couple's remains were found in a wood stove. Owens was arrested and he admitted to the killings but said it was an accident, that he had helped the couple out when their car was stuck in a ditch and accidentally run over them, and because he had a criminal record, he said he panicked and disposed of the bodies rather than go to the police. He actually told his wife that story, and he moved their cars and sold off some of their items and pawned them to make it look like a robbery. But then he took his wife out to dinner with the proceeds. As you do. On March 17th, 2015, he was arrested for the disappearance and murder of Christy and Joseph Codd and their unborn child. So let's talk about Owens for a moment, because the first thing the police always do is look into people's histories when they're investigating them. He had history of drink driving. He had history of trying to sell prescription drugs. He had a bad run-in with the police before when he shot at a police officer in a high-speed chase. He was known for possession of stolen items, and he'd had money issues in the past when he'd had to go to bankruptcy court. His account of what happened with the Codds involved the same kind of story twisting as it did with Zeb, and it didn't line up evidentially. So on April 27th, 2017, he took a plea deal that was offered, and he was sentenced to 75 years in prison without parole, serving a minimum of 59 years. His property was searched again by police, and they discovered some items beneath a concreted over fish pond.
It was nearly 3 months ago, on March 31st, that Asheville police executed a search on Jason Owens' property, days after he was charged with the murders of Christy and JT Todd and their unborn child. All along, Owens has been a person of interest in the disappearance of 18-year-old Zebb Quinn. The sheriff said during that search that the murders made them take a second look.
It's very complex, as you've reported on. Mr. Owens was a person of interest in the Quinn disappearance from 2000, and those kind of things do make the case, it does make the case much more complicated.
Those search warrants released Monday tell us what investigators involved in Quinn's case found. Fabric, leather materials, unknown hard fragments, unknown white powder substance, metal, and concrete are the listed items seized from Owens' property on that day. That search happened after one of Owens' unnamed relatives led police back to his property and said Owens poured concrete 8 feet long and 8 feet wide and claimed he was constructing a fish pond sometime after Quinn disappeared in January 2000. That individual also told police it was, quote, at a distance from the residence that would not be convenient to enjoy it from, and was not completed, and said Owens later covered it with fill dirt. Other things like plastic bags containing an unknown powder substance and burned wood near the concrete slab are also mentioned in the warrant documents. As for what those unknown hard fragments are, Asheville police won't comment any further.
In July 2017, Owens was formally charged with the murder of Zebb Quinn, and he currently awaits trial. Okay, so here's my thoughts. Firstly, I'll say Robert Jason Owens is currently awaiting trial. He has not yet been convicted for the murder. So I'm only surmising here, same as everyone else who's interested in this case. The following points did stand out to me when I researched the case. He has a lot of history, and that usually does stand out to police when they're investigating suspects. He's a man capable of murder. Now, we may never really know what happened to that poor couple that day, and all we have is his version of events. But for someone who can deal with that so maliciously, to dispose of bodies and burn them in a wood stove and then take his wife out for dinner, it doesn't bode well for Zeb when I think of him being left alone in his company. Owens had a broken ribs and head injury. Where did he get those injuries from? They weren't consistent with this alleged car accident that he'd been in. And then there was the disposal of forensic evidence. 4 days after his arrest, there was a fire in his property, and police do think that forensic evidence could have been lost. Obviously, he was the last person to see Zeb alive, which is a big factor. And he faked the call to Zeb's place of work. He sent text messages from Christy Codd's phone to her family to tell them that she was okay, which is very similar to what he did with Zeb. He said he had an accidental hit and run with Zeb's vehicle, and that's the same thing that he said about Christy too. And you think, well, that's fairly open and shut really, as well as, you have to take into account that Zeb may have had a good chunk of money on him that night going to see the car, and maybe the temptation was too much for him to resist, or maybe just being a killer, he did it because he could, he got a kick out of it. Zeb was known as a thoughtful, reliable, quiet young man, and the couple that were murdered come across as really likeable, nice young family, the type of people that weren't in Owen's world. Maybe it was resentment, or I don't know, but it does seem a strong possibility that he was involved in Zeb's murder. But then again, remember that page? Zeb got a page, and not from him, as far as we know. It came from Zeb's aunt. All the while she was with Misty and Wesley and Misty's mom. And that seems like a really strong alibi to create, doesn't it? oh, we need an alibi, so I'll tell you what, let's all go together and have dinner. And then the page can come from my address, but I won't be there because then we'll say there was a burglary, although nothing's been taken. And the couple that were seen driving around in Zebb's car, I mean, how bizarre is that? Why would you be out there in the open? And days before he disappeared, Zebb was scared. He told his family that he was worried that Wesley was going to beat him up or worse. He was in a love triangle, and they are dangerous places to be, especially when one of them people are a dangerous and possessive and controlling partner. And they've just had a baby as well, so everything was heightened. Then we have that weird lipstick drawing on the windscreen of the car, on the back of it, and I just think, personally, when I looked at it, I thought it didn't look like an exclamation mark. I thought it was more like a 1-0, and that the lips maybe signified female, and perhaps it was Wesley going 1 to me, 0 to you. Who knows? I mean, people have said things like, oh, the puppy was there to say it was puppy love. I don't really go for that. I think you really have to try and simplify things. And it was either as a symbol of his possession over Misty, or just Owens trying to throw the police off the case. I mean, what is it with the dog? Again, people have said that it's because they wanted the car to be found, and I sure know, especially around here, if you've got a dog in a car, people take note, which makes you think that there was an element of guilt. And I don't think Owens is one to have guilt about anything, especially when he could kill a pregnant woman and her unborn child. I don't think Owens would have felt guilt, which makes me think that Misty was involved. You know, what's the motive? Zebb had saved up to buy a new car, he had money, maybe it was money. Owens was a killer. Did he need a reason? If I were to offer my opinion, and this is only an opinion, it would be that Owens was involved with Misty and Wesley, and then Misty was terrified of her boyfriend. She knew he had the potential to kill, but she also felt really bad about what happened to Zebb, and so she arranged to have the car found nearby. I think it would have been mainly Owens and Wesley, but if he's not been arrested, then we will have to see. You think that Owens, he's now in prison, he's not leaving prison, you think that he would just, you know, say what happened. If it was someone else involved, you think he would, but maybe that will come, because according to Citizen Times, defense attorneys Sean Devereaux and Victoria Devereaux wrote in court documents that Owens told them about what happened to Zebb after they were appointed to defend him. He said a family member had killed Zebb and then dismembered his remains and buried them. In late May 2015, law enforcement officers interviewed Owens about this, and they shut down the interview early to go to the Bent Creek site where they believed they might find some forensic remains. But whether they did or they didn't, it hasn't been publicised, so to me it's doubtful anything has shown up. Well, it's certainly been an interesting case. I hope you've managed to keep track of it. It certainly took some working out for me and I was investigating it. It's very, very interesting though, and you can't help but feel for Zebb's mum and his family. I will be watching the trial very closely, and I do hope we finally get some answers. The only good you can take from this really is that Owens is imprisoned and he won't be getting out soon, but has there been other people involved? Let's hope for the sake of the families we can at least find the location of Zebb. What do you think? I would love to hear your comments and theories. Next week I'll be covering a case which actually occurred very close to where I grew up in Ireland. It's been stated in the papers as a dark saga of illicit sex which ended in a grotesque death. You won't want to miss this one. So join me and be sure to subscribe and press the bell so you'll be notified when that video comes out. Remember, crimes like these are rare, so sleep peacefully in your bed tonight. Bye bye.